Tier 1, we're going to start it with Barkley, Kyren, Achane, Henry, Kamara, and Mixon. These are the running backs that you can build a team around. I mean, these are all the guys that you can project out to be an RB1 regardless of their matchup that week. Looking at Barkley, in my mind, he's the best asset in fantasy football. You already have him through his bye, so you're going to get every game played going into the future. He has had one singular game this year with fewer than 10 fantasy points, and he's had 3 games with over 30. The man has the receiving usage. You have the touchdown upside every single week. You have zero hesitation with Saquon Barkley going into the future. Kyren Williams is the true 3-down workhorse of today's age. This is a running back that's seeing 80+% of the snaps every single week here in Los Angeles. This is a running back that through the first 7 weeks this season, he had scored at least 1 touchdown every week. Now, obviously, over the past 2 weeks, the rushing touchdowns weren't there. I mean, hell, he had the receiving touchdown last week. So the first 2 months of the season, it was a touchdown every single week. While this one, you have a down performance against Seattle. You still at the same time had 25 total opportunities. No hesitation. Kyren is already through the bye week as well. Devon Achane is already through the bye week. If you're looking at games where Tua has played with Achane, 23 points, 29 points, 26 points, 32 points. He's been absurd. Now, obviously, you had the stretch of games in the middle with no Tua where Achane was much worse. But the expectation is Tua is good to go in the future. Achane sees the rushing touchdown this week, which the concern which we had with Achane putting him in the tier below this last week was that maybe Mostert was going to continue to come through and maybe Mostert was going to take more of those goal line touchdowns. Doesn't look to be the case right now. Achane looks to be a locked and loaded top 3 running back every week. Derrick Henry, you can make your argument for the same thing. I mean, obviously with Derrick Henry, he has scored more points than any other running back in fantasy football. I think he's actually scored more points than any other flex option in fantasy football so far this season. The hesitation that we have with Henry is, one, obviously the receiving usage isn't as safe as what you have with the other options above him. And 2, at the same time, you have the bye week in week 14, so you're going to have 1 game less played. Alvin Kamara, you'll have a game less as well with the bye week in week 12. Kamara is the 2nd running back in the NFL right now in total points. And if you go through and look at the receiving usage for Kamara would legitimately be a wide receiver 3, regardless of anything he gave you as a rusher. Just looking at the targets that you've had over the past 7 or so weeks for Kamara. 9 targets, 11 targets, 7 targets, 8 targets, 8 targets, 9 targets. Now you have Olave down, so again, this is going to continue to be an absolute garbage offense, but Kamara's going to continue to have absolutely everything as a receiver. Now, Joe Mixon will be our next back. If you are looking at Mixon, I mean, in every game that he's been able to play start to finish, you've had 26, 27, 26, 23, 16 points. So you have 1 game with less than 20 points. You have the true 3-down workload. You have the receiving usage as well. He missed 3 weeks this season. He's still the RB8 on the year. Now, you do have the bye week in week 14, and also you don't have the receiving usage to the extent of what you're going to get with someone like Kamara or Achane. So I'll mix into the bottom of the tier. But nonetheless, all these guys are players that have 0 red flags around them that are super comfortable projections going into the future. Now, dropping down to our next tier, Bijan Robinson, yes, gets vultured with the rushing touchdown from Tyler Algier this past week. And yes, y'all want to continue to make fun of me that I'm quote-unquote too high with Bijan. I don't freaking care. He's a running back that sees 20-plus opportunities every single week. He gets the usage as a receiver. He's the running back 4 this season in total points scored. So I don't know why y'all think I'm still high on this guy. I feel like if anything, we're too low on Bijan Robinson having him as RB7. I mean, he's the RB4 in total fantasy points this season. Now, of course, you still have to go through the bye week in week 12. Jahmyr Gibbs is already through his bye. You don't have the same floor from a weekly touch perspective as you get with the other running backs in this tier. Where obviously over the past few weeks, I mean, you've had 13 opportunities, then 11 opportunities, then 19, then 17, 14, 16, 20, 17. So you only have 1 game this season with 20 or more opportunities from Jahmyr Gibbs. But the fact of the matter is it's the best offensive line in the league. And Gibbs is giving you an incredible floor from a fantasy points perspective, where you have a total of 0 games with less than 12 points. So it's interesting that he's just seeing so much fewer touches than the other running backs here, but he's still absolutely crushing. Kenneth Walker, Breece Hall will be our next two guys. Looking at Breece, yes, he's been disappointing over the past 2 weeks, but still he's the RB5 in total points scored this season. Still getting the receiving usage as well. You only have 1 game with fewer than 4 targets this year. Now, the touchdowns haven't particularly been there for Breece Hall, where you're looking at a total of 4 touchdowns this season. It is a little frustrating that a lot of times when they get down to the goal line, you're seeing Aaron Rodgers actually drop back. And then looking at Kenneth Walker, Walker's been great, RB10 this season and missed 2 weeks earlier in the year. This past week, the touchdown's not there. The touchdown hasn't been there over the past 2, which has made it look a little bit tougher for Walker. But 2 weeks ago, tough matchup going up against Buffalo. And this week, you did see the 28 opportunities for Walker, right? So still, I think you actually have a bounce back with the touchdown efficiency, and you've had the volume consistently. Looking at McCaffrey as our next option, the expectation is McCaffrey is back this week. That's what Ian Rappaport's been saying. That's what I'm expecting and what we are ranking here. Now, obviously, I'll continue to update the rankings on flogfantasy.com every single day as we get additional word. With McCaffrey, is there a shot that he goes back to his usual self and he's the RB1 in fantasy? Yeah, there is a chance. Now, also, there's a chance that this Achilles injury makes it where they want to be a little bit safer with him and instead split him and Jordan Mason, or split him and Isaac Guerrero, even when he does come back. So it's not like we can go all in on CMC. But again, I'm wrong with this stuff all the time, just like I'm probably wrong with Bucky Irving to go with fewer than 52.5 total yards for the game tonight. That's over there on Underdog. Do want to reiterate, I believe I am 1 for about 427 with our Underdog predictions so far this season. But if you wanted to fade us, if you wanted to tail us, you can find the link to Underdog Fantasy in the description and comment section. Promo code FLOCK, you'll get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, you're going to be getting a free Patrick Mahomes pick, more than less than half total yard for the game tonight, and a free team review in the live stream that we're doing every single day. Just make sure you set up an account on flogfantasy.com with the same email address to your Underdog account. That way we can accredit you with that free team review voucher. But going over to Jonathan Taylor, Taylor, I don't know if he re-injures the ankle. A lot of people are speculating that at the end of the Colts. We don't have the official word on the Jonathan Taylor injury just yet. It will be something that we have to continue to monitor. Obviously, with Taylor, regardless, you are looking at the fact that this is a below average offense. It's a running back with not a massive role as a receiver. This was the first game all season where he had 5 or more targets. And you still have him pretty much guaranteed to miss week 14 with the bye. Now, going down to our next tier, these are the players that could definitely be RB1s, but I don't think it's super easy to say it's guaranteed. David Montgomery, I believe, has 1 game with more than 50% of the snaps played in Detroit so far this season, but he also has only 1 game with fewer than 10 fantasy points. This is the best offensive line in the NFL. This is a running back that's had a total of 7 rushing touchdowns to only 8 weeks played. Now, obviously, Gibbs is the guy you'd prefer here in Detroit, but with how good this offense is, both players have been crushing all season. James Cook is a running back that has the receiving usage as well as a red zone role in one of the best offenses in the NFL. So I know Ray Davis gets you the long receiving touchdown this past week. And I do want to reiterate, regardless if you have James Cook or not, Ray Davis is a must roster running back, just because if anything were to occur to James Cook, we know for a fact you can go ahead and you can play Ray Davis. But how things sit right now, Cook is the guy. It's a nice role, and I'm fine projecting him out as a low-end RB1, high-end RB2. Josh Jacobs will be your next guy. If you're looking at the snaps for Jacobs, they have gone down consistently, but still the opportunities have been there, where you are averaging about 18 to 22 opportunities almost every single week. You're getting some usage as a receiver. It was a very tough matchup going up against Detroit, but you still managed to see 95 rushing yards in this game. And now that Love is fully good to go, or at least should be coming out of the bye week in week 11, I think you can get back to this Packers team consistently projecting out as a borderline top 5 offense. Aaron Jones will be our next name. Jones, Yeah, you have 11 points 2 weeks ago against the Rams. You only get 12 points this past week against Indy. But underlying this, you had 25 opportunities, 22 opportunities, 17 the week prior. I mean, yes, the Jets game was very bad where you leave early with an injury. But outside of that one game, the worst performance he's had so far this season was 9.8 points back in week 2 against the Niners. So it's a good offense. He has a solid role as a receiver as well and getting a ton of snaps. J.K. Dobbins playing a ton of snaps, having a ton of opportunities, and a very good offense here as well. Dobbins already through the bye week, similar to what you have with Aaron Jones. So you're going to get the extra game played. Dobbins remains a must-start running back every single week, and I still absolutely hate myself for not drafting as much of him as I could in underdog drafts. James Conner would be our next guy. Looking at Conner, it's a running back that, yes, you see the rushing touchdowns vulture this week. You have 3 rushing touchdowns this week in this offense, and a total of 0 of them go to the combo of James Conner / Kyler Murray. Now, with that being said, it was a game that wasn't super competitive against the Bears. I still think that Conner is the guy going into the future, while at the same time, you have the number 1 fantasy football playoff schedule for any running back in the NFL. So I think we're going to give Conner the benefit of the doubt for that. And also, you do get the 3 to 5 targets out of the backfield every week as well. Now, our next option will be Chase Brown. Now, with Brown, he could have room to run in these rankings. Obviously, we were saying low-end RB1 as soon as Zach Moss gets ruled out. And we knew right away that, yeah, you have to start him in any game where you have no Moss. He comes through with the 26 fantasy points with 32 total opportunities in a great matchup and a great offense. And if Moss doesn't play this next week, Chase Brown will be a running back 1 in my rankings. But I just don't know how to project this out going into the future with Zach Moss's injury at the moment. You take a step backwards and look at when Moss was healthy, while Brown obviously is the guy in Cincy. You do have Moss taking a considerable amount of work in this backfield, taking 40+% of the snaps consistently and limiting Chase Brown to a lot closer to the 15 touch mark rather than the 25 touch mark. Now, our next option will be Swift. With Swift, Roschon's taking all the third down snaps, but frankly, it may not matter because this is a running back that gives you the 29 points against the Rams, the 20 points against the Panthers, the 22 points against the Jags, the 19 against the Commanders, and the 14 points against the Cardinals. Now, the one thing that I want to point out is going into the future, if you are looking at DeAndre Swift, while he's not missing any games, he's already through the bye week, he has a very tough schedule coming up. This game against Arizona was the last solid matchup where you have a couple games against Minnesota, you have a couple games against Detroit, you have a game against the Niners, I believe. So honestly, I have Swift in the flock league, and I personally may be actually throwing DeAndre Swift on the block this week and seeing what we can get. Brian Robinson will be our next back. If you're looking at Robinson, obviously very difficult to rank him rest of season right now until we get more news on the hamstring. Sounded like he was going to be good to go against the Giants here, and then pregame warmups did not go well. So my base expectation is Brian Robinson probably gets back into this offense against Pittsburgh in week 10. But at the same time, really tough matchup against Pittsburgh. And then you still have the bye week that you have to go through as well. You don't have a ton of receiving usage. Now, of course, it's a great offense. But I do think it'd be tough to put Brian Robinson in like the tier above with the David Montgomery range at this point with the injury and the uncertainty. Looking at Pollard, if you told me that you were going to have no Spears rest of season, I'd push Pollard higher than this. But my expectation is that Spears is back either this week or next week. And when that does happen, do I think that Pollard continues to see 25 plus opportunities? Probably not. Pollard's had absolutely all the volume here, right? But still at the same time, if you are looking at Tony Pollard, this is a running back that has not had a single game with 20 or more fantasy points. Now, is that his own fault? No, a lot of this has to do with the fact that this is a very bad offense. But again, you are just kind of living off of the volume, and I'm afraid of where the volume may go if you get another running back into this backfield. Pollard will still definitely be the RB1. The issue is it split in any capacity? Now, Rico Dowdle will be our next back here at 23. With Dowdle, who's the buy low candidate for us a couple weeks back, feeling really good about that after the 21-point performance. But realistically speaking, going into the future, Ezekiel Elliott may come back into this offense. Not that Zeke's going to be any good, but Zeke may play some snaps. While at the same time, you have the Dak Prescott injury. So the Dallas Cowboys offense may project to be a much worse offense than what we're typically used to here. So Dowdle's definitely the guy that you want in Dallas. And if Dak was fully healthy, I think you can make an argument to put Dowdle a little bit higher than this. Given the uncertainty that we have with the injuries and potentially the Ezekiel Elliott addition, I would be a little bit more concerned. Now, our next guy will be Ramondre Stevenson. I have Ramondre in the Flock League. He comes through with the 22 fantasy points. Sadly, wasn't enough to get us the dub. It is what it is. Underlying this, you get 1.6 yards per carry. The week before, 2.4 yards per carry. The week before, 2.5 yards per carry. Ramondre's really only been viable in games in which the Patriots play it extremely close and or they win. And any games where the Patriots get blown out, which I wouldn't be surprised if we see a couple more of those contests going into the future, Ramondre is much worse, but it's a very inefficient rushing attack in a very bad offense. So I think we want to be a little hesitant on Ramondre. Rachaad White will be our next guy. Looking at White, he's been great over the past 2 weeks because over the past 2 weeks, you've had 3 receiving touchdowns. But realistically speaking, Bucky Irving is playing just as many snaps. Bucky Irving is running just as many routes. Now, Bucky does have the toe injury. Obviously, all of this is going to be completely irrelevant as soon as we get the Monday night game. We will revisit right after the Monday night game. I'll be streaming. We'll be updating the rankings on the site. I'll show you what the updates are. Tyrone Tracy will be our next back. With Tracy, obviously we had him as a sell-high candidate coming off of the 23-point performance against the Steelers in a game which everybody watched on Monday night. Thought process is 1, I thought he was going to be missing some time with the concussion. Clearly we were wrong. But 2, also, bad offense where you're not having a ton of receiving involvement. And yeah, it's another week where he's definitely the starting running back, well ahead of Devin Singletary, but very similar to Ramondre Stevenson. He's stuck in a bad offense. And here, with Tracy, you have less receiving usage than Stevenson does. Over the past 3 weeks, this is a player that's only had 7 targets. Now, obviously, former receiver, you could expect that the receiving usage does increase. Now, I just traded for Najee Harris from Sal, so I'm really hoping that Najee comes through strong. Obviously, over the past 3 weeks, the man's been an extremely viable running back with 20 points, with 16 points, with 16 points. But with that being said, going into the future, I very much think you could see some negative regression for this Steelers offense and Russell Wilson. You do have a horrible fantasy football playoff schedule here as well for Najee Harris, which is something to keep in mind if you are a playoff team. And obviously, since Jalen Warren's come back, the receiving usage has declined for Najee. Isaiah Pacheco will be our next player. With Pacheco, yeah, he's just going to consistently move up these rankings as the weeks go on, just because it'll be another week further removed from the injury, another week for him presumably having a shot to come back. I'm reading a lot of people saying that it could be back in 2 to 3 weeks, but at the same time, I'm reading other people say that he may not be back at all until the real life NFL playoffs. So very difficult to rank a player like Pacheco. Obviously, you'd only be interested if you are a playoff team. I will say it is a tough playoff schedule regardless, though. Javonte Williams will be our next back. I know a lot of people got very excited about the Denver Broncos offense when they went up against the Saints and Carolina in week 7 and 8. They absolutely crushed. And week 9, you could kind of see that the incoming collapse was about to take place. Or, I mean, I've said it 1,000 times now, but sportsbooks know what they were doing. You go back and against the Carolina Panthers, sportsbooks were projecting out the Broncos as a top 5 offense in the NFL in total points scored. So the situation was like, okay, start all your Broncos, including Bo Nix. And then against the Ravens, they were projecting out the Denver Broncos to be a bottom 5 offense in total points scored. So it's like, okay, you probably want to be benching as many Broncos as you can. Obviously, Courtland Sutton went nuclear regardless. But here looking at Javonte, I think it's a bad offense. A running back that's seen his snaps decline. And he's been a very inefficient back so far this season. You've had one game where he's averaged over 5 yards per carry. But you do have the receiving usage if we are going to give anything to him positive. Nick Chubb will be our next option. With Chubb, you get the 15 carries, but no usage as a receiver, garbage offense. You're going to expect Chubb probably continues to improve as the season goes on, of course, but still very little hope. Jonathan Brooks will be our next play. Looking at Brooks, all reports are saying he'll be playing in week 10. Am I thinking that Brooks is going to be like a must-start name? No, probably not. I think the realistic situation is this is probably a running back by committee where nobody's exciting. Looking at Kareem Hunt, he's an extremely strong option in the short term. If we were looking at the long term, obviously you need to be concerned potentially about Pacheco coming back in and turning Kareem Hunt into an absolute zero. Bucky Irving will be our next guy. Again, I do want to reiterate with Bucky, the usage looks very similar to Rachaad White. The one difference is going into the future, Bucky is currently dealing with the nagging injury where White is presumably fully healthy. Chuba Hubbard will be our next guy. Hubbard's been absolutely crushing as of late. The concern, of course, is if Jonathan Brooks comes in, turns this into a running back by committee, would he be excited to start either guy? I mean, very similar to what we were talking about with the Jags players, where we had Bigsby as the sell-high candidate a few weeks back, saying, okay, well, he's not going to catch the ball. And at the same time, this is a bad offense where if ETN comes back in, it's going to be a committee. So what's the real upside case here? What's the real excitement? And yeah, you see the fall off from Bigsby. ETN does nothing either. Just with these running back by committees in horrendous offenses, it's difficult to get by. Now, obviously, you can be a committee running back and you can still be great. I mean, you can go out there and look at David Montgomery. You can go look at Jahmyr Gibbs. The issue comes into when you're a committee running back in a bad offense. That's where things get very difficult. Jordan Mason will be our next player. Obviously, with Mason, by no means is it a 100% guarantee that we are getting McCaffrey back this week or this season at all. With Mason, he's dealing with his own shoulder injury, though, so Garindo may end up even being the handcuff option. Alexander Madison will be our next play. If you are looking at Alexander Madison, this is a running back that presumably is now in a 3-man running back by committee, and honestly, I don't think you can consider him. Zach Moss will be our next option. If you're looking at Moss, he's pretty much just a premium handcuff back at this point if Chase Brown were to get injured, and Moss is the guy injured at the moment. And then Raheem Mostert, I'll kind of say the same thing. Premium handcuff back. If HM were to go down, you could probably start Mostert. But even in that instance, it's not like you're going to see anything as a receiver for Mostert. You'd just be sending up a prayer that you get lucky with the rushing touchdown. But I think that should be it. I really hope I was able to help you out. Again, if you wanted to tail us over there with that underdog pick, you can find the link in the description in the comment section. Promo code FLOCK will get you a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, you'll get that free Patrick Mahomes pick, more than less than half total yard for the game tonight. And you'll be getting a free team review in the live stream we're doing every night. Just make sure that you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy. That way we know who to hook up with that free team review voucher. And again, we are looking at Bucky Irving to have fewer than 52.5 total yards. But I want to reiterate, I believe we are 1 for 918 with our underdog calls so far this season. But I think that's all I got for you. Really appreciate you and really hope we get to see you out with the live stream later today.